All right, folks, part 4 from chapter 9. Now we're going to take a look at a few items: CTRs, SARs, and FinCEN 8300. Now these are all three items that banks or companies have to do when they're dealing with transactions of over $10,000. And why do they do that? To check on the flow of money. Okay. Basically, the CTRs. This started out in order to prevent basic illegal activity. So CTR is called, this is a currency transaction report. That's what a CTR is. And it must be filed. The bank does this whenever $10,000 or more a day in a transaction, in a single day. By the way, if you, and the bank fills this out, and they don't necessarily have to tell you they're filling this out, mind you, okay? And if you go, if you go to put, $11,000 in the bank, and then they tell you they're doing this, and then you're going, well, never mind, I'll just put 9,900. Then they're going to issue, if you do that, if you break it up, they're going to issue what's called a suspicious activity report. Okay? So a suspicious activity, you don't necessarily break the threshold, but based upon what you do, it doesn't look good. Also, if you attempt to say, well, I'm going to go in and put, instead of putting $11,000 in, I'm going to put $5,000 and then $6,000, that's called structuring. And again, that's a no-no as well. Okay, so this is from you putting the money in. Form 8300, this is what businesses, I had businesses that had to do this. Form 8300, when you get more than $10,000 in cash, okay, when you get more than $10,000 in cash in a single day, this has to be reported as well. So when I owned some businesses, these were in malls years ago, and I got that kind of money, the bank with this would have to be filled out. If you don't, there's penalties and all. The government is not too happy with you. Okay, so one is the bank filling out, based upon your activity, the CTRs and the SARs, and the other one, the Form 8300, is you filling out to inform the government that you got this money. A little bit other things about evidence here that we talk about: email, text messages, social media. I'm sure, we've all heard about different email things. You've heard about Hillary Clinton's emails and people breaking into the DNC emails, but a lot of times you can get evidence from these. What were people thinking? Typically a lot about motivations and other information. Notice if you work for the company email is not private. Okay, so not that anybody would do it, but if you do, if you wind up saying something in company email, they can definitely take a look at this. Again, what this allows them to do is to link people together, linkages, right? They can go and say, okay, who's been talking to who and talking to who about what, okay? Now notice, sophisticated criminals use anonymous email. I mean, there's, I'm sure, ways around this, but not everybody, not every fraudster is a big criminal mastermind. Sometimes they're just desperate people. Okay. Other things we have to think about: data analytics, big data. So now everything online is captured in databases. Notice personal information all around the world. So people know about you and what you're up to. They know where you live. They know what your house is worth. There's data everywhere. Okay. And notice it's ballooned to staggering levels. So, if you're online anywhere, you're not living off the grid, people are collecting information around you. Okay, and notice it helps, again, with patterns, hidden patterns. So for example, even you're buying, you're spending every month shows a certain pattern to it. And what they're looking is this pattern changing or altering? Okay. Some other items about physical evidence: fingerprints on documents, we mentioned that. Phony documents, forged documents, okay? Forged signature. By the way, I was involved one time with something regarding phony documents. It wasn't on my end, it was a bank. A bank had forged my documents to make a loan. And I'll tell you, it's a very interesting thing when you get a call from the FBI. The FBI wasn't looking at me, but they did interview me. And as it turned out, this bank was making illegal loans. I happened to get one of those loans, but I did not do the fraud. But nonetheless, it's pretty unnerving when I remember my attorney calling me saying the FBI would like to talk to you. And I'm like, the FBI wants to talk to me? They've got to be bored out of their mind. But it wasn't me they were looking at, it was the bank. And they did get them, put them in jail. Again, a lot of different information, even with medical conditions. You know, like knowing that somebody has medical conditions can cause people to do certain things. Financial pressure. Just an experience that I happen to know about was a CPA in North Carolina who had a practice, and what they wound up doing, they did not turn in their FICA taxes and whatever. They filed the papers, but they didn't pay because they needed the money because their spouse was ill and they had medical bills. They wound up losing their license for that, and their answer was, yeah, well, we understand why you did it, but that's not what you should do. And so this person had their license permanently revoked. So, and by the way, they even self-reported and they still lost their license. Okay. Other evidence, again, when you're talking about this particular time, concealment, this is now we're trying to hide something, altering documents, making fake general ledgers, fake tax returns. Again, I've seen all of these items from one time or another when I've been in practice. Fake tax returns. There's actually a form where when you're working with somebody, you give them a tax return. There's a form where they can actually go and get your original tax return from the IRS. It better match up or you're in big trouble. Altered documents. Okay. Normally you have to get somebody, a qualified professional. I mean, you know, we're accountants, you know, or fraud examiners, but we're not professionals, you know, to examine the documents. But again, documents getting altered. And actually, to let you know, to go back to that deal of mine with the FBI, they used my handwriting sample. They asked me for a handwriting sample, and they determined that I was not the one that had altered these documents, which I didn't. The bank did, but that's how they did it. They had used a handwriting expert. Okay. Other things, you know, journal entries. Where do people make them? They're trying to, when they're trying to pass this money through, you understand it's going to go through the general journal. Okay. And then typically, by the way, this right here, this is a key piece of information right here. Debits to assets and expense account. This is the most common place for concealment. Okay. Most common place for concealment. So when somebody's trying to hide something, these are the accounts you're always looking at. You also would be looking at any debits to revenue accounts. Oh, yeah, here we go. Debits to revenue accounts. This is another one. Okay, debits to revenue should be carefully scrutinized. Okay. And again, they have to be, somebody has to be checking all this because, you know, somebody trying not to get caught is going to try to be pretty crafty about it. Tax returns. So again, they're going to take tax returns, and notice you can actually, these tax returns can be correlated. You can take a look at the difference between the tax returns and their actual book. For those of you that have taken a corporate tax class, Schedule M is where reconciliation is done between book income and tax income. So they'll definitely take a look at that. Okay. And again, certain deductions, you know, the government knows within reason what is fairly common for business. So for example, they have data for all the businesses of all the different sizes. So if you have a medium-sized landscaping firm, they have all the data on medium-sized landscaping firms within your general area, and they look at, the IRS can look to see, you know, does this make sense with what everybody else is doing? It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but again, they're looking for outliers here. Okay. By the way, I forgot to mention, on those 8300s, state governments and publicly traded companies do not have to fill those out. State governments, publicly traded companies, and I think there's one other entity, I can't remember, one other type of entity that don't have to fill those out. So if it's publicly traded, those folks don't have to worry about it. They have other things to worry about, and state governments as well. All right, folks, that's part 4. We'll be back with part 5 in just a minute.